In the early 1990s, a young girl named Beth Thomas shocked psychologists across America. She was only a child, but her behavior terrified everyone around her. What many people didn't understand was that Beth's story began long before the fear. From the outside, Beth Thomas looked like an ordinary little girl. Blonde hair, soft voice, quiet appearance, the kind of child most people would never fear. But inside her home, something deeply disturbing was happening. Beth had been adopted alongside her younger brother after suffering severe neglect and abuse early in life. Her adoptive parents hoped they could give both children a safer future, a normal childhood, love, stability. But very quickly, they began noticing unusual behavior. Beth showed little emotional attachment. She struggled to connect with others. Punishment seemed meaningless to her. Empathy appeared distant. At times, her behavior became frighteningly calm, almost emotionless, and slowly, fear began growing inside the household. Because Beth was not simply acting out like a troubled child, something deeper seemed broken emotionally, something invisible, something her family did not fully understand yet. As Beth grew older, her behavior reportedly became more disturbing. Her adoptive mother later described living in constant anxiety. Beth displayed manipulation far beyond her age. She lied easily, struggled with emotional connection, and sometimes behaved in ways that frightened the people trying to help her. The family reportedly began sleeping with locked doors, watching her constantly, feeling unsure of what she might do next. To outsiders, this sounded impossible. How could a child create this much fear? But psychologists studying trauma understood something important. Children who experience severe abuse early in life can develop emotional responses very different from other children. When a child grows up surrounded by fear, the brain itself can begin adapting for survival instead of emotional connection. Trust becomes difficult. Safety feels unfamiliar. Love can feel confusing. And in Beth's case, years of trauma appeared to be shaping her behavior in deeply disturbing ways. To understand Beth Thomas, people first had to understand what happened before her adoption. Beth experienced severe abuse and neglect during the earliest years of her childhood, years considered critically important for emotional development. Instead of safety, there was fear. Instead of protection, there was trauma. And psychologists believe those experiences deeply affected the way Beth understood human relationships. Most children learn comfort through trust, through affection, through feeling protected. But some children grow up learning something entirely different. They learn unpredictability, fear, emotional survival, and when trauma happens during the earliest stages of development, the emotional consequences can become severe. Beth's story disturbed many people because it challenged comforting assumptions about childhood. Society often imagines children as naturally innocent and emotionally safe. But trauma can change behavior in terrifying ways, especially when it begins early enough to shape the developing brain itself. Eventually, Beth began receiving professional treatment from psychologists, specializing in childhood trauma. And for the first time, experts started recognizing that her disturbing behavior was deeply connected to her past. Beth was not simply a bad child. She was emotionally damaged. Psychologists observed signs associated with severe attachment trauma, emotional detachment, difficulty forming trust, problems understanding empathy and safety. In many ways, Beth had learned to survive emotionally rather than connect emotionally. Therapy became intense and highly structured. Specialists worked carefully to help Beth develop emotional awareness, trust, and healthy attachment. Progress was not immediate. Healing from childhood trauma rarely is, but slowly, changes began appearing, and perhaps that became the most important part of Beth's story. Because while many people focused on fear, psychologists focused on recovery. Today, Beth Thomas's story continues to disturb people around the world. Not because it feels supernatural, but because it feels human. It forces people to confront uncomfortable questions about trauma, childhood and emotional damage. What happens when fear replaces safety during the earliest years of life? How deeply can trauma shape the human mind? And perhaps the most important question of all, how many invisible wounds do people carry without the world ever noticing? Because sometimes, the most frightening stories are not about monsters, but about pain left untreated for far too long.